Hey guys, welcome to the Scholar Online YouTube channel, the channel that is all about learning. So today we are going to continue where we left off 2 weeks ago, I think, with our tutorial where we are building our own ChatGPT application, software as a service, SaaS, a platform on Django. So we've done quite a bit so far, and today's tutorial, before we get into it, I just want to remind you, remember the basics. Like this video, remember to subscribe to the channel so that you'll get and turn on your notifications so that you get notified every time when I release a new video. And if you go to the description of the video, if you just click the description over there, you will see useful links. So if I say I'm going to link it in the description below, that's where you'll find it, okay? And then I will try and put timestamps to just help you navigate through the video, and my contact information is also there as well. Today we're going to continue where we left off, and where we will be at the end of this tutorial is what you see right now. Right, there's a couple of things I've added, but you will see it as we go along. But one of the most interesting ones is the ability to remember conversations, and obviously some sort of formatting over here. So let's say you wanted to write you Django code, all right? So let us ask, please, generate Python Django code for a profile model that extends the user model with more interesting and useful variables. So I'm basically asking it to generate code for me. So one of the first things that you'll see that we have done is that we have sort of pimped up the front end just a little bit, at least to just help with a visual representation of what ChatGPT returns. And you can see over here, so what we had before was just everything would be one long paragraph, but now you can see we have a little bit of some sort of formatting where if you're gonna get Django code, you can see all the spaces and everything, and this just makes it useful. And the next thing we've added that we're gonna be able to do by the end of this tutorial is the ability to remember conversation. So let's say I've created this, and I say, okay, this bio, location, birth date, profile picture, and I want to say, okay, remove the profile picture variable from the code and show me the new code without it based on what you already gave me. All right. So now what we're doing is that we are trying, now I'm asking it a follow-up question. Before we didn't have this, we didn't actually have a conversation. Every time someone reset the page, everything was starting from scratch. But now we actually have a conversation, because now I'm telling it to update what it has already done, remove this, which is what you get on ChatGPT. But what we built didn't have this. So now we've added all of that. Now we've removed that, and it's showing you the updated code without it. Okay, so this is amazing, guys. I'm really excited about this video today, and stay tuned right at the end, because I'll talk a little bit about this new function calling thing, and I think we are going to definitely try and include it in future tutorials, because that's how we're going to definitely separate our video from the rest. So hope you enjoyed this video, and remember to leave your comments below, and let's get started. So far, this will be video number 3, and I will just try and recap video number 1 and video number 2, so that if you are catching up with us now, you know exactly what we've done so far. So if you go to my YouTube channel and you go to my channel, of course, and you go to previous videos, we had lecture number 1. This lecture number 1, what we covered over there was just how to get started building a Django application. So it was mostly very basic Django boilerplate things, how to install the application, the database, the passwords, and all of those things. And then we took the HTML from our previous projects, which we had done before in the past. I think it was this one and that one. And we just built a very, very simple landing page similar to this one, not exactly similar, but like the whole idea was we just have an input box where we type a question, and the question that we typed gets displayed in front of us, and then in the background it goes and does an API call, and it connects to the ChatGPT API. It brings back the response and then we display it. It was very, very simple ChatGPT application. This application, if you want to know how to build it, watch these videos. This one and this one's the ones with the purple, especially this one with 11,000 views is the most popular one. This is the one where we actually built that application from scratch. You need to watch those videos to figure out at least how we did the HTML of it. So we didn't want to spend too much time. You can see the video is already 1 hour 12 minutes and it's just covering basic Django installation. Now, after this video, of course, we then decided to input authentication. What is authentication? Authentication is just the ability for users to just log in and log out of the application. The application to know who's logged in, who's not logged in, and so that you can serve the people that have profiles. Any basic software as a service application needs authentication. Otherwise, anybody would just land on the website and then start typing and use, and then you can't keep track of anything. So obviously, because we are building software as a service, first step is we had to sort out authentication. That video took us 3 hours, and this was just doing authentication. Just tells you how involved our videos are, because in this channel, I'm basically taking you step by step. I cover everything in the code, and what I did this time is that I made the code available on GitHub. So if you go into the video description, you can find the link to the GitHub page where the videos are, and I'll show you that GitHub page here. This is our GitHub page. If you go there, Dirty Digital, we have 2 videos over here. We have the lecture 1 and the lecture 2. All right, so now here on the lecture 2, this is what we did last week, and then I've got a nice description of it just covering authentication. So what we have so far is how to create a Django application and how to build authentication. So we've got an authenticated application. If you see over here, when you come here for the first time, you have to log in to use the application. So even if I go to the root of the app, if I'm not logged in, it will take me to the login page for me to log in, which is what happens with ChatGPT anyway. Have you ever tried to log out of here? If you log out of here and then you come back and you try to access the same link, it takes you to the login page because it needs to know who you are. That's very basic stuff. So I'm going to log in with a profile that I created last week, and then I will show you what we have so far. So this is now the logged in page. Once you log in, like I said, this looks very, very simple. You got a very input page. We could move this to the bottom of the page, but I'm not too concerned about that. You've got an input page. You type what you want to type. And then, so let's say, remember ChatGPT can write code. Let's try it. Help me write Django code for a profile model that extends the user model with a few other necessary features for a typical user profile for a SaaS application. Right, so I'll say necessary there, and you say ask ChatGPT. What it does immediately when you ask it, it takes what you've typed and it displays what you have typed over here, and in the background it's going back and it's contacting ChatGPT to get the response, and it's going to bring the response forward, and here's the response. Okay, so it gave me a profile model. You can see there's a profile model. So there's a couple of things we're going to have to fix. I would like to maybe display, because you know ChatGPT responds in MD. So maybe we need to find a formatter. Let's just note that down. A formatter that can format, what do you call this? Let me just ask ChatGPT, what do you call this? MD, what is it formatting? I think it's MD, I'm not sure. Let me just, like the type of formatting that, because you can see here you've got the 3 Markdown formatting, exactly. Markdown. So I'm just going to note in my to-do list, this is Markdown formatting. So this is Python code, and it types the Python code in here, and then it does other things. And this is how you'll be able to read code and things like that. So basically what I need is a Markdown formatter. So I'm going to obviously try and import and install Markdown formatting, I can already see that's one of the things I'm gonna have to do so that the code can display properly the way it's supposed to display, headings and sub descriptions and all of those things. So that's the next thing we're gonna do. The next thing I want to do as well here, just looking at this, is obviously you need to make this user friendly. So you want people to know what's going on. So immediately when you type this button, when you click this button, you want to give some sort of, I don't know, either a moving button or a loading button or something that just sort of tells the user that, okay, we are now going to fetch the data, because currently when you type, nothing happens. And maybe let me I want a loader. And then number 3, I perhaps wants to move this a little bit up because it's really at the bottom. Maybe have some margin bottom over here. Okay, margin bottom. And then the last thing I want to do is you can see people can log in here, but people cannot log out. So I just want to do a quick logout button at the top so that I can be able to log people out of this. And then I will say that my chat interface at least is good to go, and then we can move into the rest of building this application. What we're going to cover today is we are going to now make this a proper chatbot. So currently this is not a proper chatbot. If I refresh this page, everything is lost. And whatever I'm typing, it doesn't remember what I typed before because I didn't record anything in a place where I can go back to it and say, well, what did I type before? Because if you look at the ChatGPT documentation, what enables a chatbot is being able to even tell it what you discussed previously so that it can continue the conversation. So a chatbot, if you just tell it what you're saying now, right, it only answers that immediate question, and it works fine. As you can see, it works pretty fine. But for us to take our chatbot to the next level, we want to be able to even give it a system message to sort of customize the chatbot so that it knows what it's supposed to do and it focuses on specific things. After you've given it a system message, we want to be able to say, okay, if the user said this and the chatbot responded previously, and then you said something else and you're continuing a conversation, that it would remember what you said previously. So we can have this go in a sort of this sort of list of objects can grow. Obviously, we can keep a limit and say, okay, we don't want you to grow to 1,000 previous conversation items, but maybe the last 10 prompts that you gave it, it at least remembers that, or the last 5 prompts, because I think in a typical conversation, the last 5 prompts is sufficient. There's no way you're going to have a conversation with something you said yesterday and expect the chatbot to remember. But at least the last question I asked you and the last 2 questions I asked and how you responded is definitely important to keep the conversation going. So obviously we need to build an actual chatbot, because what we have right now is just a completion model, to be honest. It just completes or sort of gives you an immediate response, but we need to take it a step further. And for us to be able to do that, we need to now build in a model and a database to be able to store that information beyond the current request, because the current request is where you have what you asked it now, but how do we remember what it responded to the last time? So if we go back to our views and then we look at the home view, which is this one over there, you can see this generate chat response. I just want to remind myself what I had on this function. I think it's inside of the AI engine. So this is the function that we have. Okay, we do have a system message. Your name is Karabo and you're a helpful assistant, but we only have 1 prompt, and every time it just creates that 1 prompt. So there's no ability to look back at what it is we discussed before, right? And then the other thing is, yeah. So we need to fix this function, but for us to fix it, when it gives us a response, we need to be able to record it. So we need a model to record the responses and things like that. And that's what we're going to do next, okay? So let's start with pimping our ride so we can handle some sort of formatting in the system. It's going to be very basic, and we will be using the Markdown library. So this is very straightforward library. You install it and you can convert Markdown into HTML, for example. So let's copy that. Let's stop our thing. Let's clear and just paste that in there. Pip install Markdown. Okay. So I've already installed it. When you install it for the first time, it will install it. Then after you've installed it, you go in here. Let's import it. Let's import this Markdown at the inside of our view function right at the top. So let's import it over there. And then after we've done that, this is all we need to do is to convert our string into Markdown. So if we go back into our view function, let's make some space. This is the view function for the home page. And just sort of like, say HTML is Markdown, whatever the text string. This text string we know is going to be what gets sent from there. So let's say text string is equals to that. And then we convert this text string into the Markdown, all right? And then, so this will be the HTML string. And then we just display the HTML string instead of the text string, okay? So let's save that and see what we get. Convert. So once we've done that, let's run our server, and let's go to our site and refresh, and let's use our example. There's an example I think I've typed at the bottom here, because I want to generate code and I want to see how it's gonna look like when I've converted it to Markdown. So obviously I don't think we'll get a perfect result of, especially unless if you're going to work harder to do your HTML CSS styling, because I think there's definitely more styling you can do inside of your CSS, but we'll do sufficient enough to get a well working application. So you can see over here that it has converted some things into a code. There's some sort of bullet points over there, but you see your breaks are showing as breaks, they're not rendering as HTML. Something is not right here, but I think this is because of what we did over here when we replaced everything with breaks. So let's remove this replacing everything with breaks and try that instead, okay? Okay, remove the BRs. Cool. I think this has already restarted. I'm going to try and get the same question again. So let's just copy that question again and paste it, refresh the page, and then paste it in here. And while this is searching, what I want to do is, you can see over here, all of this is wrapped inside of a paragraph, right? I just want to remove that, because ideally we don't really want to wrap this in a paragraph, because now the HTML might be code, or it might be a heading 1 or heading 2 based on whatever the Markdown was returned, right? So let's remove that paragraph around what we're doing in here and have a look. This is a little bit better. You can see the breaks are sort of somehow converted, but this is not. You can see the code thing is not quite there yet. So I actually went and I asked ChatGPT to help me further, because there's a bit of a problem here. The new lines don't get caught in, they're not like, because when you write MD you don't usually have new lines, and then there's new lines in here, right? So ideally you want to remove the new lines, because I think they are confusing the system, right? So if you went into your AI engine over here and you said replace the this new line, because there's a lot of new line that gets in it, just remove it, right, and see what we would get, right? Because I think it's sort of causing some sort of errors. Remove the new lines. I actually spent quite a bit of time trying to troubleshoot this in the background so I don't waste your time, but I want to take you through the motions and through the steps that I went through, because if you were a developer, you are a developer, but I'm assuming these are similar steps you would go through. You would try this and see if this works, then you try the next thing and try the next thing. It is what I try to teach even my young ones all the time, that coding is not, no one gets coding perfectly the first time. Even when I started to learn, I remember once spending an entire weekend trying to solve one problem, and I still didn't solve it until I took a break. So sometimes you will get things into situations like this. If you've never done something before, it's not giving you exactly what you want, it's not the code that's broken. You just have to you have to try different things and try and see what actually eventually gets you to the right answer. Now that we've removed the new lines, now everything is broken completely. You can see that it picks up where the code is, but it's just putting everything in one big paragraph. We actually don't want that, okay? We actually want to preserve the new lines, but we don't want to convert the new lines into breaks, because if you convert the new lines into breaks, then the breaks don't get caught up in the MD conversion, and then they create a bigger error. So this is how I did it, and you can try many ways, and you can try and figure out, what works. So I just tried to find a character that I thought, it's not going to be in the code anyway, that gets returned from ChatGPT. So I said, replace the new lines with XXX, so I know where the new lines were, right? And then I continue over here in the views and complete and regenerate everything the way it would have been if the new lines were replaced with XXXs. And then after I've done this, then I replace my XXXs back with breaks, because now the break will be caught up properly, in the thing. So we know that the way the new lines are is where the breaks were, right? So we still remove it so that we can do the conversion into Markdown properly, because if we replace it with breaks at the beginning, then the breaks confuse the Markdown, and then the Markdown considers the breaks as normal strings, and it doesn't actually it renders them as a normal string, not as a breakdown that actually a break line, which should actually represent a line break. So remove that and have it as a just normal string, and then later convert it back into breaks, and then see if that will help, right? So let's try that. Okay, break, remove breaks. This is just my way of trying to solve this problem, right? You can try whatever way works for you, but I just want my display to look a little bit better. I don't want my display to look as as it looked before. So let's go and try and let's see, where's my index? I want to copy my perfect, my code generating thing. So you can try any other method that you think will work for you. Maybe there's more ways. I know there's a template filter that comes with Markdown, and I actually tried this method before. There's a template filter that you can use, and I'll show you how to do it, but it won't work with our inside of the script, because what we're doing here actually is we are generating the content from the script, and then we are building an HTML block inside of the script, and then we are appending it to the list group on the fly. But in reality, what should be happening is, like with Django, if you actually just sent if there was like variables inside of the view function, let's say you got the variables, the conversation inside of the view function, and it was recorded as Markdown, right? And you were able to save it in your database as Markdown. When you display it in here, if it's Markdown content, you can actually use the template tag. So you could use, and I'll show you how to do it, and I think later on we'll do it. And that's how I did it. I built a template tag called Markdown, and you use these library to do it. So you create a file called template tags.py, which is over here, and then you build a new template tag called Markdown. It uses the same library, Markdown library, the one we installed, right? But it builds a template tag. A template tag is a function that you can run inside of the HTML template. It's very, very advanced Django stuff, but there are certain situations where you don't want to save things as HTML, for example, in your database, but you want to display it as HTML inside of your view function. And the perfect example is this situation where where OpenAI brings us the information in MD. So it makes sense to record it like that and continue working with MD everywhere you go. But in the HTML itself, you just want to be able to display it as HTML. So what you do is that you build a template filter tag, and that template filter tag inside of the template itself, you add a filter up when you display the thing, and it does the calculation for you, or it does the conversion inside of the HTML itself. And then inside of the HTML, you get your template tag. So we're not going to cover that. We'll cover that later on, because later when we start saving these things in the database, we're going to need that. So for you to get that ready, while I'm waiting for this to run, I will go through it later. Okay, so it has run and it looks much better than it looked before. You can see the breaks are preserved. You can see the code looks pink like code, and you can see the line and the bullet points, everything is preserved. The only thing I don't like about this is the pre. You can see like the code, where the code is, you see where the code is. You don't see the code breaks, because with coding you want to be able to see the different spaces inside of the coding. You understand? So I would love a way to to be able to preserve the line breaks inside of the code. Not the line breaks, but the spaces. Like, when you write Python code and you write a function, like over here, right? There is spaces in between the def and whatever. It helps you read the code, especially with Python. It helps you with formatting, because the indents are very, very important. And obviously when somebody copies and pastes this, they won't know where the indents were. But I know that ChatGPT actually brings the indents with you. It's just that they are lost in between the conversion process in here. So I'd like to be able to at least preserve the indents in here, right? So that's the next thing. So I asked actually ChatGPT how I could do it, and it gave me this code where you can, after you replace these breaks, you can you can wrap this thing inside of this pre thing, right? But at the same time, so let's try this. Let's say this HTML string is equals to that. And where would we put it? We would put it inside of the views. So we would put it in here. We would say HTML is pre-style what space wrap, whatever this. So the same HTML string in there, we just we are editing it with the pre-wrap. All right, this is optional. Okay, I'm going to make it very clear that this is optional, and there's probably a better way to do it, because I'd actually rather only wrap the code, right? I'd love to be able to put this thing just around the code if there is code. So I'd like to check if there's code in here, right? And around the code is actually the only place where I want to put this, right? Because the rest of it is fine. But let's run it like this. Okay, ideally you only want to wrap this around the code, right? So once you've done that, then you can replace the x-axis with the breaks. Okay, let's try this. Actually, don't you want to replace it with breaks first? So you want to replace it with breaks there after the conversion. So replace the x-axis with breaks, so that when you do this to it, the breaks are already in it, so it knows where the breaks are. Okay, let's try that. Add the the spaces. Right, so let's refresh this. Let's let's copy our code generating thing, and let's see what it will come up with. Obviously, you can spend as much time as you like trying to solve this problem, but I think I'm going to end it here, and either live with it without the breaks, or live with it with the breaks as this is. Okay, so this is a little bit better. So what you can see here is the the code, it picks up, the code, and it still has the formatting. It's got the breaks in all the right places, and at least if you copied and pasted this code from here, you would be able to to do a lot with it. And but the only thing I don't like about this is that if you ask it a generic question, which tell me about New York City, for example, tell me about New York City, which is a very, very generic question, which I don't expect it to bring any code responses with it. It will work. It will go and tell you about New York City, but then it has this very weird formatting, right? So you can decide to live with this, but I think this is definitely better than what we had before, where you couldn't even see where the code fits in and so forth and so forth. But I think there's definitely more that can be done to improve this formatting. So that's the first step, but I'm going to leave it here for the tutorial so that we can continue to other things. And I've already given you some cool examples of what you can try out, and you can try and see what else you can do to try and get the formatting to the way that you want it. But let's move on to a couple of more things, because what I want is to add a bit of a margin bottom over here. So I think that's simple. We can do it inside of the list group. Where is our list group? Hi, this is Karabo input group. So this is the input group. So this is what goes in at the bottom there. So this input group, I'm just going to give it a margin bottom 5, and maybe give it some breaks in there, and just see if that will help. All right. I thought I had given it margins. So if we try this again and we refresh this, let's ask it the same question that we had over here, which we know is going to give us a very long response. I'm just trying to get it to get to that point where I can scroll to the bottom and see if there's a bit of space. I think if the margin bottom doesn't work, because I think I already had some sort of there is some space now at the bottom, so it did work. You can see it scrolls up, but it also so the other thing you might want to do is to no, you don't really need to do that, because you could put this title over there so that it doesn't disappear when you're scrolling up this page. All right. So I think I'm cool with my display right now. We've got our code display working and so forth, and it's looking much better than it was looking before. So the next step was to try and get a get this button to be a loading button when you press it, so that people can know that you're doing something. And for that, I decided to work with a bootstrap spinners. So there's a couple of bootstrap spinners over here. So I'm going to actually just use this one. Okay. So what I want to do is that I want to put a spinner next to this button, because the other thing as well is you don't want to have the button display while it's fetching, because then somebody will create another request. You want to, as soon as a person has sort of pressed this button, if it would disappear, that would be great, so that people don't press it multiple times. So what I'll do is that I'll do a conditional display over here, so that it can display this. But let's see first of all what this looks like. Div flags and so forth. This is a div. Let's give it the same MB5. Margin bottom 5, and I want to have an ID. All right, ID of spinner, and then I want to give this an ID of question. I hope there's no other ID called question already. All right, so basically what I want to do is I want to do conditional displays. So the first thing is the question must be the first thing to show, right? And but let's of all see if both of them will show right now. Currently both of them, spinner and question, should show, and you must try this as well to just make sure that your spinner works fine and that it got the CSS right. Okay, so let's try and do that. Show the spinner. . 。 . 。 . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . Oh yeah, git add. What did I do here? So okay, git commit. All right. When you do this all day, you sort of tend to lose your head, but I think I've got my head back. So let's try and see if I can at least see both the spinner and, so you can see there's a spinner, there's a margin bottom there for the spinner, and I think margin bottom 5 is a bit too much, so I'll make it MB3 and MT3 as well. Margin top 3, so let's try that. All right. Add a margin bottom and top. So MT is margin top and MB is margin bottom. Okay, I think people that are Bootstrap specialists will know this, but the more you code with this, the more you'll remember. And okay, so MT3 doesn't seem to work. Why doesn't that work? I do not like that. Okay, so all right, so whoever margins don't work, you can always put in a break. Okay. Oh, because I put this MT on the wrong. Yeah, this is MB5 and I need to put it over here. So this is the loading and this is the ask. Sorry, I didn't see that. That was my mistake. All right. All right, so let's restart that. I don't think you need to restart this all the time. It's just a bad habit. Okay, that looks much better. Okay, so you can see the spinners there. And if you look at Bootstrap, you can get like different color spinners. So if you look over here where they've got like the blue spinner, so you can see spinner border, text primary. You can use that around the spinner. So over here, spinner border, let's see, spinner border, you can put in here text primary, and then that will give you a blue spinner. Okay, which I think will fit nicely with the rest of our page. All right, and then you can also make it like bold if you want. I think there's some, and you can use a different type of a spinner, like the spinner grow. You can give it a margin, all right, which is probably a good idea. Let me give it like a margin 3, a margin 3 on the spinner. We'll give it a spinner, a margin all around, and yeah, and so forth and so forth. And you can even use like a bigger spinner if you want. Style width, you know, this is a bigger spinner. Maybe let's do that. All right. 3 rem, height 3 rem. Okay, and you can put the spinner on a button and all sorts of other things. Okay, but I'm not going to put it on the button. I'm going to display the spinner when the button has been pressed and actually make the button disappear. All right, and for that I know exactly how to do it, but I'm going to ask ChatGPT. I actually use ChatGPT a lot for my coding these days. What is the JavaScript code for hiding a div after the page loads, right? Okay, rewrite this using, because I want to use jQuery, using jQuery. There you go. So you use this, you need to make sure you have jQuery for that. Okay, so here inside of my JavaScript, anyway, after you've loaded the jQuery, so the jQuery needs to be loaded there because it's telling you there that you need the jQuery. This is 3.6, so this is an older version because this is obviously an older version of you need to put this inside of a script, of course, and then load it. So what does this do? So when the document is ready, this is after the page has loaded, you can hide the div. Okay, so after the page loads, the one we want to hide is spinner. Okay, so you want to take the spinner and hide it. Okay, and then we want to show the question. Okay, so you do that, you copy that, and you do that, and you say a question show. Where's the question? Here's a question. All right, you want to show that. Show. It will show automatically, but if you're going to use hide and show, it's always good practice on my side. I do it all the time to use both of them to hide and show at the same time, so that I know what's hidden and what's being shown, right? So when the document loads, I want to hide the spinner. All right. Then after the document has loaded, right, when the button is pressed, so this is GPT button click. When the button is pressed, immediately before you do anything else over there, all right, I want to show the spinner and hide the button. So before I do anything else, after the GPT button is pressed, I want to show the spinner and hide the question button. Then over there, you get the Ajax call, and you do all the things you're doing. But after you've gotten your success results, then you build the thing, right? But for me, before I build the thing, this is now after the success thing. I want to then go back to show the button again. Okay. So over here, hide the spinner, show the button. So there's three things that happen, right? The first thing is when the page loads, we hide the spinner, we show the button. When someone clicks the button over there, we show the spinner and hide the button when someone clicks the button. After the API call has been made, when we are building this HTML element, we then hide the spinner again and show the button again. If someone presses the button again, this loop will just continue, so forth and so forth. All right, so let's have a look. So once we've done that, let's refresh this page and let's go back to our thing and let's refresh the page. Okay, so the spinner is not hiding. Something ain't right. So what's supposed to happen? The spinner is supposed to hide, and then the question button is supposed to show. So let's see if there's any error being inspect. Because we've got JavaScript errors, they'll show up in the console. All right, that's not it. There's a problem here. The cross-origin opener policy header has been ignored because the origin was untrustworthy. Find either from response, please deliver. All right, so I don't know what this is. Okay, so this is not working, but there's nothing is displaying over here. Obviously nothing will display on the other side because this is a JavaScript thing. You should be able to see this is a console, this is a JavaScript console. So if anything is the case, you should be able to see it there, but on the console I don't see dev tools. Let's see, removing. Yeah, I don't see any JavaScript error. Let's try and press the button and see if something happens. Hello. Wait. How are you? I think I saw this disappear for a bit. The button was gone. You see? The button was gone and then now it's back, but this never disappears. So the button actually went away. Let's see, spinner. The spinner, I don't know, maybe let me put all of this inside of a different div. Because just to show the ID, and try that. The spinner never goes away. Okay. Let me call it the spinner. Maybe it's the name. So let me give it a different name, the spinner. So this ID, the spinner. Show if the button is clicked, the spinner. And then over here, the spinner. Because after page load, I need the spinner to hide. But it wasn't hiding, it was just staying there. Let's see if it'll work this time. All right. Coolio, let's get this page rolling. Let's stop that. Let's refresh. There you go. Okay. So I can't even tell you what the problem was because it's the same principle. There's the div and the only thing I can think of is perhaps, you know, putting this in a different div and making that div disappear. That at least deals with this class. And then after that, renaming it. So perhaps the name spinner is reserved for something else and it doesn't pick. I don't know. Sometimes with JavaScript doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, so how are you today? Dish. The spinner shows, the button disappears. When the answer comes, the button comes back, the spinner disappears. You understand? Tell me more about New York, right? The spinner appears when it's asking the question, so the user knows that they're listening and it's taking time, and they wait for it. You know, they're not in a rush. If they even if they were in a rush, they wouldn't be able to re-click the button, because that's always a problem. For somebody to like keep clicking the button even after they have, you know, oh yes, and then it answers it. So it's starting to look more and more like the chatbot right now. So the one other thing so I did the margin bottom, the formatter, the spinner, and then I needed to do a logout button. So we need a button over there that is our logout. And let me see, where must this button go? So in my HTML, I think this is the button. I think this is where the button was. I'm gonna just try, right? Class is equals to button danger or primary, and call it logout. Scholar Online ChatGPT app. I don't think it's a demo anymore. Let's call it ChatGPT application. Let's try and see if this button will show. Otherwise, I'll have to have a look at the original code to try and find how it was before. Git push, because there was a button there and I removed it, and I think I would have left the space open so I can put it back when I wanted to, but I can't remember because it's such a long time since I did this code. So let's have a look. You see, this button is not where I want it. Okay, log out. So I'm gonna have to go back to the original code for this. Okay, so let's go back here and let's go to getting started. Let's look at some let's just say bootstrap examples. There you go. I don't want to download it. I just want to have a look at the headers, but not all the headers. Yeah, the headers. I think these are the headers. Where is the code? There you go. This is a sticky nav bar, so you can see over there. This is the button that I want with all of that, right? So let me view page source, and let me just copy that whole header the way it is. So where is my header? That's the body. Fixed nav bar. So this is the nav inside of the header. Okay, so there is the header first, and then there's a nav inside of the header, and then you can see the button, the search button over there. So we had the fixed nav bar and we removed all of that, and then there was a form. So this was the list. So this is a collapse nav collapse ID nav collapse. It's this one. So this is this div, right? And inside of this div there is that unordered list. So inside of that div there is that unordered list, and then after that list there's a form and a button. All right, so all I need is actually the button. So I can put the button outside of the unordered list, and this form class deflex, I don't know if this is important, but I'll try and call it, because this is not a form. I don't want to put in a form in here. So let's remove the button from there, and let's put it inside of a div, and so that we can add the class of deflex, because I think this deflex puts the button to the other side. So, and log out. All right, let's try this. Okay, the button. Because it's going to be important for people to be able to just log out anytime they want from the application without, you know, having to go through a whole lot of things. There you go. So now we've got our logout button there. It doesn't work yet, but at least I've got it displayed properly. So to get it to work, you can actually just replace this with an anchor. You can replace the whole button thing with an anchor, and then you put an href. Okay, and then we're going to use a Django formatting, and we say there's a URL for logout. Assuming that you've been building this with me, and you would already have a URL for logout. Okay, and it's called logout. So you can just copy that logout there and put it in there. So when somebody clicks this button, it takes them to that URL for logout, and the URL for logout is going to be in the views here, logout, and it just logs out the users and redirects them back to the login page. So we've already built the logout view function in the authentication steps that we did last week. All right, now it's just a matter of implementing that logout URL, all right, inside of a button. So if you're following along, you should have the code already sorted out. You should be able to just put in that URL in the button, and then it will be able to log out the person immediately. So when I click this button, it will log me out, and then I will see the login page again. And now I can log in again. And I can log in here. And once I've logged in, I'm back into the application. Hello. When I type now, it has the thing, and then it shows me what I'm doing. And when I'm ready to log out, I can log out again. So now let's get ChatGPT to remember conversations. And for the only way to get ChatGPT to remember conversations is to save them in the database. So a good thing is that we now have a database. You know we have a database because we've already created profiles. We've created a profile for myself, and anybody that comes in here can create their own profile, and we can have multiple profiles. And a profile has a user one-on-one relationship with the user, which means for every user there's one profile. Now we can start adding other data tables to the profile, and and add more content. So we can start. I think I said let's call this ChatGPT question. Maybe we can let's call it ChatGPT question. So what we are saying is that we're going to create a new model, and that model is going to be used to record or to store or to save the questions that get asked, whether it's a question, a prompt, or whatever it is. So inside of our application over here, whatever it is I'm asking, hello, how are you today, I'm going to record it in the database so that I can pick it up later and refer to it. That's the first step of being able to get this to actually be a conversation. And we're going to have to record and I think I used a Boolean. There's two methods. You can either use a Boolean to say, because you need to know whether a question or a prompt was generated by you, or it was generated by the model. Because if you look at our documentation over here, we need to, inside of the chat completion, when we provide the list of messages back to the chat engine, we need to tell it whether this was the system, the user, or the assistant. So we need to be able to keep track of user generated prompts, which are the ones which we're going to say the system, the user generated it. Then we're going to need to keep track of assistant generated prompts, so that we can specify that this was generated by the assistant. And then obviously we can build our own system generated prompt. You only need a system prompt once. Okay, so let's do that. Then so basically all we're going to do is that we're going to create this model. It just has profiles, prompt, and user generated, which is a Boolean. It can either be true or false. That's all we need. Even though there's three types here, the system, we're not going to save the system stuff in the database, because there's only one system prompt that we need to give it, if we're going to give any system prompt at all. Then once we've done that, just save this model, right? Save all of this, and then we're going to make migrations later on, but don't worry about it. I'm not going to put this inside of my admin file, because I actually don't want to display this inside of the admin of the database, because I don't want, for security, for privacy and security reasons, I don't want anybody that hacks my system to be able to go into the admin and print out all the questions or things like that. This is valuable data. So I'm not going to put this in my admin file, and it would be good practice for you not to do that either. You can still retrieve it from inside of the application, but if you have it in the admin file, it means anybody that logs into your admin, if somebody cracks your password, they can like just download your entire database of questions and figure out who's doing what. You know what I'm saying, in your application. So for security, I'm just not even saving it at all. It just doesn't exist there, right? Then once I've done that, then let's go back to rewrite our function. Now this function, not this one, our AI engine function. Now what I'm going to do something different with this function, right? I want to keep the AI stuff in this file called AI engine, right? But instead of doing the building up of the messages in here, I need to build them somewhere where there's access to the database, right? Which can actually be in here. Why do I need to build it anywhere else? I can build it in here. All right. So I can get a prompt, and then I can work my magic in here to build up the prompt. Let me see. Actually, no. I don't want to build this in here. I want to already have messages sent here. Okay. I want to build this inside of the view function. But then again, it's bad practice to write a lot of code in the view function, and then we will export it out later. Okay. But let's just think, think out loud, right? And let's say somebody would be, let's call this function, I don't know, get chat response, right? Get chat response with a prompt. I'm just thinking out loud. We will rewrite this later. And over here is where we need to do this from the view function, because we need to know the profile of the user. Because now we need to, because if you look at our models, when we create the prompts or when we get the prompts, we need to know the profiles of the user. So profiles, and you can only get that from the context of the request, because only when someone is logged in, and from the request can you see the user. And we have put in our decorator there, which means no one can access this page if they're not logged in. So when they're logged in here, we know that we can get the request dot user dot profiles. Okay, this is going to be the profiles, right? We know we can get the profile, get the profile of the current logged in person. We need to do this so that we can be able to now start differentiating who's having a conversation. And when we save the things in the database, if you look at our model, we need to identify who does this belong to, so that when we fetch it again, we can fetch it again based on the user. Okay, so we need to know the we need to know the profiles. Okay, so definitely this needs to take in the profiles as well. So then let's build this function. We can build it inside of the AI engine. We can build it at the top here, or we can build it at the bottom, right? Let's build this function. Let's make some space. And inside of this function, what we want to be able to do is, we know the profile and we know the prompt, right? So the first thing that we need to do is, there are 3 steps. Okay, the first step is we need to collect the conversation, and then we need to append, to create the messages, append and create the messages, and then we need to call the API for a response. Then we need to save the response again. Save the response in the database again. And then return the response to the user. You understand? So now we've got the prompt and the profiles. We need to collect the conversation from the database, append and create a messages list, right? List, and then call the API with the list, because now the API is taking the list completely, and save the response in the database, and so forth and so forth. Okay, so let's collect the conversation. So to collect the conversation, we need to import the database. So we're gonna say from .models, import. Inside of the models, what did we call it? In fact, let's collect everything. No, do we need the profiles? No, let's just collect this for now. Right, so let's collect this from the database. So we need to you know, what do we call this? Dot objects dot filter on the profiles is equals to the profiles that you have over here. So in the database, collect all the questions. So let's call this, I don't know, what do we want to call these? Records. So let's get all the records, which is a ChatGPT question record, whatever. Should we call it just ChatGPT record? Let's actually call it a ChatGPT record. That makes a little bit more sense. So in the models over here, instead of calling this ChatGPT question, we haven't made migration, so we can still change the name of the model. So let's call this a ChatGPT record. All right. So collect the ChatGPT record, filtered on the profile, so we get all the records that have been saved inside of there. And remember, we will know whether it's user generated or not, because that is part of the thing. Then after we've collected these records, we need to then append it to the messages list. But before we can append it to the messages list, if we look at our documentation, we need to create this system message. Okay, so I'm going to say my system message is equals to an object, right? It's this object over here. We can even copy what's in here, right, and paste it in there, right? The role is a system, the content is you're a helpful assistant. All right, you can be wild as wild as you like with this to customize your assistant to whatever it is that you want to make it, but for now I'll leave it simple and leave it to you if you want to customize this to anything else. All right, after you've done this, right? You've created the system message. You need to then create a list. So actually what you need to do this is that you need to, when you collect this, you need to order it, because you need to make sure that the last question is the first one in and the first one in is the last. Because for example, when you collect these questions, when you append it to the list, when you append these questions to the list, you don't want to have the first question last and the last question first. You know what I'm saying? So there's an order that you need to get, and I always get confused on whether it's append by because if you look at our models, every time we create a model, there will be a date created variable that we have in there, and this date created will be created automatically at the time when the person saves this thing for the first time. Because when you save this thing for the first time, it will check if this date created is defined, and if it's not defined, it will make it based on today's time. So basically, when this thing is saved, the date created will be automatically created, and it will not be updated because the next time it will not be none. So this function will not run. This only runs if it was none. So basically, we can use this date created to filter, right, our profiles based on the date. But whether it's appending, descending, whether it's minus or plus date created is what I always get confused. So I'm just going to go back to my notes and remind myself which one it should be here. I think I have it in here. Okay, so it's just the one date created without the minus on it. Okay, that's fine. So it's date created without the minus, which means it will order this in the right order based on the date that it was created, so that when you append these messages to your system, to your list, it will know, it will append it in the right order, so that when you send it to OpenAI, it's not like the last question first and the first question last or something like that. Then what you do after you create the system's message, first of all, you can just say messages is equals to an empty list. All right. And then after you've created your system message, you can say messages append. You can append this system message in there. All right. After you've appended the system message, now you need to go through all your records and append them one by one. Okay. So you're going to say for record, in records, right? You actually want to check whether the thing is user generated or not. All right. Remember here, when we save it, we're going to save it user generated or not. And I know the thing is not saved in the database yet, so just bear with me as I write this function, because we will get to where we are saving it in the database. So after we have done this, we will then say, so assume that the stuff already saved in the database and we've saved it on whether or not it was user created or not, but you'll see later on when I save it, when everything comes together. So we'll say if record dot user generated, then we know that this was generated by the user, because when we save this, we will say true or false based on whether or not it was a system or a user message. If it's user generated, then we need to use this object, right? If it's user generated, we're going to say the obj is equals to this. The role is the user and the content is that, and the content over here, we can actually just say the content is going to be, let's do that. Let's use an F string and say that it's a record. All right. Dot, what is it called in here? It's record.prompt. All right. It's record.prompt, and this is if it's user generated. Okay. Else, the obj is equals to, you can copy this one, is for the assistant generated. All right, but it looks exactly the same except you use assistant over there instead. So, and then we will use an F string here again. Okay. All right. So if it's user generated, we will, this is what the object will be like. And then if it's wara generated, if it's system generate, the assistant generated, then we will have it like that. And then after we create it, we need to say messages append obj, which is the same thing that comes over there. we append it as we loop through. So what we're doing here, we are looping through our records, because this is going to bring back a list. When you filter, you get a list of records. Then you're going to loop through those list of records and check if the record is user generated or not. If it's user generated, you append it as user. If it's assistant generated, you append it as assistant, and you already ordered your records, so you know they are going to be ordered in the date they were created based on the time they were created. So now you've got your messages sorted out. So save the response in the database. So actually what we need to do now, actually the step 0 would have been to save this in the database, the first, before we did anything else. Okay, so save the prompt, save the no, we don't save it here. No, we don't save it here, because when we save it here, if we fetch this, then we will fetch the thing we've saved already. So what we do is that we call the API for a response, which is now we've got this function that we can call the API for a response. All right, and then we can say response is equals to this, generate chat response with the prompt and the messages. So the prompt is this prompt over here, same prompt, and then the messages is now this list of messages, and when it comes over here, we just put the list of messages over there, which includes also the system message. Okay, now that we have the response sorted out, right, save the response in the database. Okay, so now remember here, let's call this error. Okay, error, because this thing, and I've been working with ChatGPT APIs for a long time. Every now and then it can bring back an error. This just doesn't run, and for no reason whatsoever. Just like when the API is full, when you know the system is down or whatever, you just get an error. So you need to always account for the error. So if there's an error, obviously when you save the response in the database, you're gonna say if not response is equals to error. So this error, so you need to make sure that the response is not an error, because you don't want to save it in the database if it's an error response. So if the response is not an error, then we're gonna say, actually before we even do this, if the response is not an error, then we're gonna save this ChatGPT thingy first. ChatGPT.objects.create. Right, so we can go into the models and we can create this, right? We create profiles. We have the profiles over here. We save this based on the profiles. The prompt, we have the prompt. And this is user generated is true. Because if you save the prompt, this is a prompt that comes from the user, it is user generated, okay? But what we're doing here is that we are only now saving this record only if we didn't get an error response, right? Because we actually like, you know, so I'm gonna actually import time as well, because I'm going to then make it sleep for a second, so that there's a bit of a timing difference, you know. Just 1 second. Then after we've done that, then we create another record. Okay, create the assistant response record. All right, so this time it's not the prompt that we're saving, it's the response that we're saving, which is a response. This is the same response from the database or from the AI assistant, and we've made sure that it's not an error response. Okay, and then now we save that response, and user generated is false. So this specific time, it's not user generated, it is assistant generated, so that when we do this over there, the assistant generated will go to the right place, the user generated will go to the right place. So once we've done here, now we can record this, we can save that, and we've given it like a second in between, just to, you know, give it some time, so that, because otherwise, you know, Python will be like boom boom, and maybe it will save it in the same split second, and then when you try to order by time over there, it will make no difference, which we don't want. So let's give it a second in between, so it will slow down our responses a bit, but you know, I think it's worth the speed, just to ensure that we don't have a problem there with building our conversation in the future. So we save the responses in the database, and then we return the response to the user. All right, so we then return the response to the user. So we do quite a bit of things here. So we can try and test this, but I think this is okay. We first of all collect all the responses, but the first time we do this, there'll be no responses in the database, right? So when there's no responses in the database, this will be now an empty list, right? This will be like an empty list. And then messages will be blank, and then we'll have our system message, and then we'll append the system message. But for recording records, there'll be nothing to append, because this will loop into an empty list, and there'll be nothing to append. So after we've done this, by the way, we need to append the current. I knew I was forgetting something. We need to actually append the current question. So the current question, we don't save it here. We save it only if there's a response. But over here, we need to append it to these messages. So we need to actually have this thing that runs with the current question. We need to create obj1. Let's call it something else so that it does not overwrite that thing. And it's a user message, and it's the prompt. Okay. So this is the prompt. The actual prompt that was sent, we edit as a user, whatever, and we append obj1 before we call the API. You understand? And I try to now, and I don't usually like to write, because I just code a freestyle. I don't always comment my code, and I know it's a bad practice, but maybe this will help you when you go through the code later on in GitHub, right? So now we have we appended the user prompt before we send it into these messages, and then we generate chat response with that. Now the only thing that we need to do over here is this answer actually will be the same answer that gets returned there. It's just that the only thing that happens with this new function, it's doing exactly the same thing as what we were doing before, except it now it records the conversation. So it saves the prompts over here, whether it's saving it as a user prompt or as an assistant prompt, and then it fetches the prompts over there, organizes them, adds them to the messaging before it sends it out there. And if there was nothing there, there'll be an empty list. It will only append the current one. If there was something in there, it will append everything that's there, and then it will send that. Obviously, in future, we actually want to manage this list. We don't want this list to get to 1,000, 200,000 messages. So we're gonna need to filter this. I mean, cut down this list over time as it grows. When it grows to a certain length, we're gonna need to limit its growth. But for now, let's just check that this works. All right. So then this function is the one that we need inside of our views. So this is the function that we've used. So instead of this generate chat response function, we now have get chat response. Let me just make sure this get chat response is the right one. Yeah, we have this get chat response. So now let me just check in the views that we importing everything. So from AI engine import everything, so it will import that function as well. And then here we just replace this function with that function. So we're not running the top function anymore, we're running the bottom function, and we are collecting the profiles first, right? And then let's think about this now. When we're saving it in the database, what are we saving? So this is all the editing that gets done. So let me see, AI engine. So over here, we've already replaced the N's with X's. So I'm actually thinking, let's not do that. Okay. Let's leave all of these to be a view function thingy so that we record everything as we receive it from OpenAI. So because this is now saving that stuff. So let's save everything as we receive it from OpenAI. And let's do this. Prompt is equals to that. Where are we doing that? So let's do this text string is equals to text string, replace that. Okay, so we get it, and then we immediately do that to it, the new lines with the x's, and then we do all of these in here so that we are not saving in the database the x-axis in the database, because then we'll just get confused. So let's do all the editing in here. So whatever gets saved in the database, let's see our prompt, AI engine, our model. This needs to be a text field, correct, not a character field, so that it will just save the stuff as it is in there. And then when we collect it, it will be just like the way we received it from OpenAI. So when it gets sent back to OpenAI, it will just be the way it was received from OpenAI. And then we just manage our formatting inside of the view function instead. Okay. So we get the profiles, we get the chat response, we do the whatevers that we were doing, and then we display the HTML string. But now the only difference is now we should have the ability to remember the conversation, right? So let's test that. So we need to make migrations again, all right? We need to make migrations. So, import. So we're importing the wrong thing because we renamed this ChatGPT record. But over here, we are importing ChatGPT question. All right, so let's replace that with ChatGPT record, and let's just make sure that we have replace. So this is ChatGPT record. We're not using that. Shouldn't be anything in here. Shouldn't be anything in there. Shouldn't be anything in there. Close that. All right. So let's try making migrations again. Okay, so this time it created the model called ChatGPT record, and then let's migrate the model. All right, let's clear this. Let's run our right. So now if we go to over here and we refresh this, no errors, right? So let's try and find a question that might need a follow-up. Okay, it's one of my favorite questions. I am at a restaurant and trying to pay my bill of, say, 200 rands, but I would like to add a 10% tip. How much should I pay in total? Right? Let's ask ChatGPT. Cool. So if 200 is whatever, it's calculating that, right? And then I need to just make sure that this information is saved in the database, right? So let's go in here and clear and Python manage.py shell. Let's go and look at profiles.models. .models, import everything. Let's go try and find our model, this profiles.model. Let's try and get this model. Record is equals to this model.objects.all. Let's try and fetch that. Let's try and see .count So there's 2 records. So 2 records have been saved, right? So now exit. The best way to test this is to actually ask a follow-up question and check that the chat is going to remember that conversation. So the follow-up question is, what if I would like to increase my tip to 15% based on what you have already calculated? What should I pay now? So now I'm asking a follow-up question to the previous question, which I asked for a 10% tip, but now I'm asking it, okay, now actually I want a 15% tip, and it should be able to remember, I'm not telling it here what the amount is, all right? First 200 rands, which means it remembers 200 rands because that's what I asked it before, right? So first 200 rands, the amount of tip is 15%, then it calculates the tip. Next, find out the difference between 10 and 15 is 10. Finally, the additional tip amount is 220 plus 10, which is 230. And then if I move it from 10 to 15, that's how much I'm going to pay. So now we've added the ability to actually get the AI to remember conversation, which is amazing. Now, what I want to do next is, and I wanna give the person the ability to clear a conversation. So let's say I'm talking about money now. I don't want to talk about something else. I don't want it to keep referring back to it, right? So actually, let's not do that. Let's leave it. I don't think that's important. I think let's try and just keep this list that we've got over here. Where is it? This list that we have over here, I just want to keep it to a limited amount of numbers. Like I want to make sure that we never ever get to like a list worth 1,000, like, because now what is happening is just going to keep appending. If I chat with it all day, by the end of the day, it would have appended 100 conversation, 200 conversation. It will not stop. It will just keep appending. So we need to give it a limit, right? This is to save the space in our database. But if you start having thousands and thousands of users, you actually don't want to have a very long conversation. You want to keep the conversation long enough for it to remember previous questions and responses, but you don't want to have like 100, things in there. So I think I've got this in here, in my code, in my, there it is. Delete the conversations. There you go. So I'm just going to go in here and just add, it's a very simple line of code, yet efficient, right? So I can say while responses count, so this is records. So while the count of records is greater than 10. So if there's more than 10 in here, I think we can even make this 20. I think 10 is too small. It was 10 because I had an application where I really didn't want a lot of, historical records. But 20 means 10 prompts from you, or actually let's leave it back at 10. All right. 10 means 10 prompts from you and 10 prompts from the AI. After that, it will start to delete the last one. So records at 0, delete. Okay. Records at 0, delete. So what this will do is that anytime the response is greater than 10, it will delete the last one. So it will just keep deleting the last one. So when it's 11, it will delete the last one. When it's 12, it will delete the last one. And it will delete that in here. We can even put this for record in record. No, actually, no. We just put it in here because this just looks at the count. If it's greater than 10, which means, we can make it 11 so that so it will be a nice even number. Yeah, not 10. I don't think it matters, whatever number you pick here. And that's it. And I think that's the end of our tutorial for today. I will continue next week, but I think this is amazing now that we can have a conversation and record it. And then next week we'll continue because we are building a software as a platform. This is just the beginning. We might still have many more tutorials, but what I wanted to explore next week is definitely how to use this function calling, which is a new functionality by OpenAI. And I think this is really what's going to differentiate all the people just copying ChatGPT functionality to people that are creative about building really useful software for guys to use. Okay, so stay tuned, guys, and make sure you don't remember next week's tutorial, because we're definitely going to take this application of ours to the next level, and I'll see you then.